Big Man Up Top listeners, Joe here. Ed and I are off this week for Easter, so we thought we would bring you this special extended version of Ed's chat with Graham Daniels, General Director of Christians in Sport. His playing career took him to Cardiff City and Cambridge United, followed by some managerial roles, and he is now Director at Cambridge United alongside his role at Christians in Sport. This chat was incredibly insightful. He shares about his journey into sport and faith, and he speaks with great wisdom on the need for us to cultivate a purpose-based identity rather than a performance-based one. Really great advice for all of us, I think. Anyway, there was so much good stuff in this interview, we thought we'd play the whole thing for you now. So sit back and enjoy Ed's chat with Graham Daniels.
I'm delighted today to be joined by Graham Daniels from Christians in Sport. How are you doing, Graham?
How are you doing, Ed? Good, thank you.
Very good, very good. So, well, let's start by hearing a little bit about Christians in Sport and what you guys do and sort of what's the mission of the organisation.
Well, I reckon I could tell you the most easy way by telling you my own story, which is I'm a 15-year-old kid. My school cricket team's short of an 11th man. I go because somebody's got to make up the numbers. If you don't like cricket, don't worry. I'm long leg and third man. I don't bat. I just hang around. But on the bus is an 18-year-old boy who's captain of cricket, captain of rugby, best athlete at school. And on the way back, it's a 50-mile journey. He's kind enough to sit next to me because I don't know anyone. And he asked me what I did at the weekend. I was in year 10. I said, I played cricket Saturday, did nothing Sunday because it was years ago in Wales and everything was shut. I said, what did you do? He said, I played cricket Saturday. I went to church on Sunday. He was 18. He was king of school. He had a beard and everything. I said to him, whoa, why do you go to church? And he blushed and he said, because I follow Jesus. It turned out a few years later, it was the first time he'd ever told anyone he was a Christian, tried to witness to somebody. And I just said to myself when he said it to me, blimey, it was a 50-mile trip. We were only just out of Cardiff. I said to myself, blimey, 45 miles to go. I'm next to a nutter. But the reality was that 7 years later, I became a Christian as a young footballer. And I became a Christian partly because that bloke broke the mold. I mean, I'd never put those two things together, even in the sort of 1970s, forever ago, I just didn't put those two things together. And then I realized you could be a real keen sportsman and a Christian. So rather than give a description of Christians in sport in the broadest sense, it's almost as much of a verb as a noun. It's if somebody knows Jesus personally and they're involved in sport, how can they make a difference to their teammates and their colleagues and their fellow supporters around them while still being dead normal, which is what my man was. So that's Christians in sport, whether it's youth, university, international, domestic, pros. It really doesn't matter. That's what it is. That's what it is.
Isn't it fascinating, the impacts that we don't know we have? I'm sure he's sort of blown away by knowing what impact that's had on a young Graham.
Ed, it drives him mad because I tell everyone the story. And so he says, will you stop telling that story? Because he's embarrassed that he's being held up for it. But that's it, isn't it, Eddie? It works because you can make everything very sophisticated and complicated. It seems to me that if God's kind enough to reach any of us and draw us into himself, then the best thing we can do is trust what he made us to be in the first place and let him change us in that place. And that's what my mate was, that's what he was. He was a Christian. He was in sport and he found his way over the years to putting them both together. And I saw it. It's a brilliant thing.
Just off the back of that, how has that then impacted the way you share your faith?
Well, the biggest impact was after I became a Christian, aged 21 or 22-ish, I left home in Wales. I was in Cambridge to play. And I was back in Wales and I went to that guy's house. His name was Gwion. I went to his house and his dad, and I'll answer the question. This is how it impacted me. His dad said to me, do you know what happened that day? So it's like 7 years later, right? I said, no, what happened? He said, he came home, the boy came home, Guillaume came home on Monday. And his dad said, how was the game? Cricket match? And he said, yeah, all right. And his dad said, oh, all right. Well, didn't play well? He said, yeah. He said, any runs? Yeah, 90. get any wickets? Well, yeah, 5. Oh, so what's the matter? He said, well, in church yesterday, there was a talk about sharing the good news about Jesus. And it dawned on me that I've never really told anyone. So I was determined on Monday I was going to talk about Jesus to somebody. And then this guy, this is what he told his dad. This guy's, we had to make up the numbers. We took this guy from year 10. I sat next to him on the way home. I asked him what he did the weekend. He asked me. I told him I went to church, and Dad, I blushed. And I said, stupid. I said, because I follow Jesus. How rubbish was that? He said, I must be the worst evangelist ever. I'm never doing it again. But the Lord used that in the end to transform my whole life, because I could see there could be a Jesus who could reach me from God. So that's coloured my evangelism. Frankly, that colours my evangelism. Everyone's a useless evangelist. Anyone who thinks they're any good is a big time Charlie. God's just kind, and he uses idiots like me to tell somebody else about Jesus, and he gets to work when he's ready. So that's how I see evangelism. I said it earlier, Ed, but try and be good at being normal and say something about Jesus. And of course, if you're not normal, you probably hang out with people who aren't normal, so you're normal to them anyway. So it's fine.
So on a recent podcast, we chatted with Bruce Dyer.
Oh, what?
I know, yeah.
He's a giant.
Yeah, what a man he is. And he shared about his faith journey, and he came to know Jesus, and he basically walked into the dressing room of whatever club he was at. I think he said it was Palace at the time. And
Palace it was.
And he just walked in and said, I've given my life to Jesus. And the dressing room just laughed at him, but I loved that was the expression of faith for him, sort of unlike your friend. I'm probably more similar to him in that, Jesus is doing a lot of great work on me, but the courage to come out and say it, is a huge step. But for Bruce, he just walks straight in and says, Jesus has changed my life,
Oh, there are one or two in the world who are unstoppable out there, and he's definitely one. But you know what I'm thinking there now? See, because that's like Bruce probably became a Christian in the 1990s, somewhere late 90s, perhaps something like that. I was 10 years earlier than Bruce. I mean, you'd never really talk about it inside professional football, but I do think. Well, today it's totally different. I mean, there isn't a dressing room in the country where there aren't 7 or 8 people who meet to pray together before a game in a team. It's just normal. And it's all happened in the last few years. And here's my human hypothesis. I mean, God's in charge of everything, but here's my human hypothesis. I think the likes of Bruce Dyer, Cyril Regis, Gavin Peacock, big names back in the 90s, I think those guys, when there were hardly any Christians, gained massive respect from their teammates. Good players, great blokes. And I think what's happened is lots of those people who may not be Christians still, who played with those boys like Bruce, who are now managers and coaches and directors of football in the football world, when they've met Christians, their impression of a Christian would be a Bruce Dyer or Gavin Peacock or a Cyril Regis. And so they actually welcome Christians, and it actually makes it slightly easier to be a Christian in a changing room, even as a young, shy boy, as a 16 or 17-year-old. And I think people like Bruce, when God's economy works it all out at the end, we'll find out that people like those were the ones who made it possible for hundreds of people to be Christians in football today. I really do think that.
Like your friend, we just don't know the impact we're going to have, and we'll find out one day. Let's touch on your career. Tell us from a young lad making up the numbers in a cricket game, where's your sporting career gone from there?
Well, I grew up in Wales, Ed, so obviously it's a million years ago, but when I was a kid in the 70s, Wales were world champions at rugby. They just used to win all the time. And I lived at the heart of rugby land, a place called Llanelli, where half the Welsh team came from, who were the best team in the world as a nation. So you had to play rugby at school. Like, no one played football at all. You just played rugby. That was the end of it. Nobody could was allowed to do anything else. But you could, when you were about 16, you could start playing football for your school team. So I just ended up playing football and signed for my local-ish team, Cardiff. And then I was there till I was 21. And then I was transferred to Cambridge. Now, that was the championship then. But if you really want to know about my career, Ed, here it is in a nutshell. When I signed for Cambridge, I signed early in the season in 1983 as a young man, like 21 or 2 or something like that. think football seasons now, October 83 to March 84. October, November, December, January, February, March. We played 31 games in the Championship and the FA Cup. Drew 4, lost 27.
Wow.
Lost 27. I played in all of them. Didn't win a game for 31 games. So that's probably a good summary of my ability level and my career. I learned so much, and I became a Christian in that period, in those 2 years at Cambridge. And we were relegated twice. So I say it as a laugh, because it's an old-fashioned film, an old film which old fogies will know, like me, which was called Four Weddings and a Funeral, a comedy. But I say to professional athletes all the time, no, that film is the wrong way around, because if you're in professional sport, you know very well you're a fan. You know very well it's more like 4 funerals and a wedding, because you get one big cheer every 5 games or something, unless you're Man City or Liverpool or somebody. And that's it, really. I played into my middle 20s. I'd become a Christian, went to Bible college, played semi-professionally until I was maybe 35, managed teams in the Conference South and Conference North, which is outside the Football League, into my 40s, and then became a director of Cambridge United, went back to my old team when I was 50. So I'm 62, so I've been there about 12 years. So I've stayed inside the game in various formats all that time, really because, as the two of us chat, isn't it? God wired me up to be sporty, particularly for football, and he came to meet me. So, of course, where else is my school of discipleship? It had to be in the things that he made me good enough to have good relationships and the chance to join other people in. So that's what I've spent my life to.
You were telling us about those 31 games.
Drew four though.
Yeah. Four very big points.
Don't forget those.
I'd love to know, how do you deal with that personally, but also as a team as well? Because I mean, as a fan, it's horrible enough. So what's it like as a player in that situation?
Yeah, no, good. It's a good, serious question, and I've done quite a lot of work on this, obviously, because I've been in this field for a long time. I think here's what happens, Ed, many people will get this straight away. For these, let's do the men or women who are playing at the top level, the pro levels of, say, football then. Yeah, we're talking about football, pro levels. Invariably, when they were 5, 6, 7, or 8, they're the best kid in their class. And if they're in the pro leagues, they were probably the best kid in their town, their city. They were in the regional teams once they started. They were picked up by a club. So by the time a child who's now a pro was 12, 13, their whole identity was footballer. Wherever they went, at school, the local newspapers, online, this child would have been, in a sense, famous in their own neighborhood. Very few of those children, even when they get an apprenticeship or scholarship, as it's called now, as a young footballer, 16 to 19, hardly any, maybe 3% of those who are still playing at 15 get a scholarship. 97% don't. If you get a pro contract after your scholarships, 18, 19 years of age, of the people who get a pro contract, only about 5% of those ever played professionally in the first team. And most have finished at 21. So with that context in mind, it's devastating. I've been working with a young man recently who played for a Premier League club academy from the age of 12, 13. Got a scholarship, got a pro contract, was on loan to lower league clubs for 3 years. At the age of 21, got cut, couldn't find a club, can't find a job. So it is devastating. Psychologically, emotionally, it's a tough, ruthless, cutthroat business. One injury, your career's over. New manager, you're out of the club. Unless you're the superstar players, right? Unless you're the absolutely cream of the crop at the top of the Premier League. So I think as Christians, there's no question in my mind, none whatsoever, in the world that we live in now, that I think governing bodies are starting to take Christians seriously, not because they're heavy-handed, but because Christians have a narrative that says, well, if you've got a performance-based identity, which is so destructive because it can't hold the weight of your value when you don't cut it, when it lets you down, everyone in soccer is now talking about, all the young players are getting this narrative. Watch your performance-based identity. Try and develop a purpose-based identity. This is the lingo. This is the vernacular. What's a purpose-based identity? It's something that is really meaningful to you and relational, but isn't to do with proving yourself by your football performance.
Yeah.
It could be a hobby. It could be doing exams, training outside of school, but above all, it's friends who don't care whether you win or lose, who don't judge you by your performance. The whole world of football is talking about that for young players, for mental well-being, from performance mentality to purpose mentality. I think the Christian, and I'm seeing it happening all the time now, can speak into the purpose mentality or the purpose identity without shame or awkwardness by saying, well, some people's purpose identity is actually a person who loves them, whether they win or lose, whether they're high or low, whether they're up or down, whether they fail or succeed. This is the Christian faith. And people are introducing the Christian faith, if you like, as a purpose-based identity based around a person who loves you independently of anything, which is the gospel, right? Sorry, that was a bit long, Ed.
No.
But it's a thrilling time to be in football when we think about these things, and other sports, actually.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I remember so early in my broadcasting career, I did a lot of stuff with ITV Sport, and I worked on a bunch of FA Youth Cup games. I remember getting to see Phil Foden when he was, sort of 14, 15, 16, that kind of time. It was very obvious that you could see this young talent. He was tiny, but he was running rings around every player on the pitch. And, you could just, you watch him for 5 minutes and go, okay, he's a superstar. But the thing that always struck me was, because I was often pitch side at the end of the game. And the thing that always struck me was you saw this lad come off the pitch, and he looked like a young lad with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I remember seeing, the coaches sort of around him trying to just sort of speak into his situation. And they were effectively almost trying to say, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? But he had clearly been through years of that expectation level being so high. Yeah. And I just thought, gosh, that can't be good for him,
No, and you'll have experienced this because of your journalism background and broadcasting background, because everyone has a version of this in different forms. It could be like the best looking kid at school. It could be the cleverest kid. It could be the best sports person. It depends on the cultural kudos, how big it is. And Foden would have been at the very pinnacle. Yeah. And yet, when we think performance mentality, you've got to have it. You've got to have that drive in a sense. So you won't make it, even if you're good enough. So you've got to have that. But I heard him this year, actually, at the PFA Awards. He was Premier League Player of the Year, voted by the Professional Footballers Association by his peers. He was voted the best player in the Premier League last year. And at the awards, he gave a little speech, and Alex Scott interviewed him, and she said, well, I know you hate public speaking, so I'll keep it brief. He said, but what would you like to say? Your peers have voted you for this award. And he just thought, wow. He's a young man. He was so humble, but here's basically what he said. He just said, well, it's an incredible honor. He said, but, the most important thing I can do is to thank my partner, my family, my parents, brothers and sisters, because without them, I simply couldn't sustain this. Or words to that effect. Yeah. So is it me? Somebody's looking after him in a sense that there's love in his family. There's people who aren't judging him by whether he won on Saturday or if he played well or not. So he certainly sounded, I don't know him personally at all, of course, but he sounded like he had a degree of equilibrium. And I know I'm pressing this point back, as you mentioned him, but I'm thinking, once somebody's got to have a performance identity because they've got to have that drive to cut it in football, the next thing, you've got to give them outlets where they're not being judged by close people for that. They're just being loved. But we've got such an obvious continuity with Christ here, without it being an alien concept in the modern sort of way of thinking almost, that we're saying, well, there is actually a person who will love you without any fail at all. He'll never be flawed in his love for you. And when a well-known Christian, a Saka or something, speaks out about his faith, and when other players hear that, they're quite a long way down the road because they're being taught that you've got to have a purpose outside of sport. And it's peer influence, really, that seems to be helping lots of managers and players say, well, tell me more about this Jesus thing. How does he help you?
Yeah.
So we're in a very happy time, I think, in terms of the advancement of God's cause. I really do think so.
That's very encouraging to hear your take on it, and I completely agree. I'd love to just sort of finish by finding out a little bit about your hopes and dreams, particularly in your role at Cambridge, which is really fascinating. What influence do you think you can have, or do you hope you can have in that sphere particularly?
Well, I think, like all Christians, isn't it, that you live in your lane. What you do, you broadcast. You're a broadcast journalist. You're not using that to be a Christian in, are you? That's what God made you, and I think this is quite important, really. You didn't ask this at all, but sometimes people will say a version of, "Oh, isn't it fabulous that you're involved inside a football club, as a witness for Christ?" And in a way, it sounds plausible, but you have to correct it and say, no, it's an innate thing. God made me this human being. That's my school of discipleship. I'm not going in there as an alien to try and do something to the people in it. When God made us in our mother's wombs, when he knew us in advance of time, he knew when we'd be born. He knew what our abilities would be. He knew what our vocation would be, what our family life, what our professional, how we'd make a living, how we'd pay the bills. All those are things that he knows about. In that sense, at the most pivotal level, I just say, well, Lord, you didn't just say, as it says in Ephesians 2:8-9, didn't just save me by grace, not by works. You didn't just do that to me, but you gave me, Ephesians 2:10, good works prepared in advance for me to do. I'm God's workmanship. And I view my football as the Lord is kind enough to come into this world, take my place on a cross and beat death and come and live in me and prepare me for eternity. But he's also kind enough to say, well, I'll stick with you now, you idiot, in all your stupidity and ups and downs and misery and mourning and sinfulness and joy. And I'm going to teach you and tutor you how to throw your weight on me in the highs and the lows. But where else is God going to do that for somebody like me, even at my age, other than through the one thing which has been the dominant factor in my life where I felt I most belong, which is football. So that's my school of discipleship, as I've said a couple of times. And as we record today, we've had a terrible start to the season. Terrible. That's why no one should come and work near me, because we've played 10 in the league and we won our first game on Saturday. We just got off the bottom of League One and we play Stevenage tonight. But I'm there because I was made for it. And so when I'm there, what can I do but as a Christian say, if it goes well, God, please help me now. The final whistle blows, you win. Please help me not to be full of it, but to think of the person's needs in front of me who's from the opposition. Lord, give me the right words, give me the right behavior pattern, posture. And if we lose, give me the right behavior posture to respect the people around me from the other team. This is the life of sport, isn't it? That's the life of sport. So that's all I hope for, that I could be the best version of what Christ wants me to be in the midst of the vocation he's given me. And I just think, what a privilege, what an unbelievable privilege.
Graham, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I have one final question. This podcast is called The Big Man Up Top. We love the good old-fashioned big man up top on this podcast. So what I want to know is, if you were putting together your dream 11, who would be your big man up top? Yeah.
Oh, well, I reckon, I've got to say this, I've got no option because Dion Dublin's on the board of Cambridge United. So if I don't say Dion, I'm done for. I'm absolutely done for. Boy, was he a force. You really couldn't get near him. When the ball went up to him, it stuck. You never got hold of it again, unless it was in the net. So I'll have to go for the dude Dublin, or else I'll be in all sorts of trouble. But real oldies, if anyone listens to this who's ancient, John Toshak, the Liverpool centre forward, Cardiff City and Wales.
Welsh legend.
legend. So Dublin first, Toshak second.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Graham, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Great fun, Ed. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sure you'll agree, really insightful stuff from Graham Daniels there. Please go and check out the amazing work that Christians in Sport are doing by visiting christiansinsport.org.uk. From the whole team here at UCB, we pray you have a wonderful Easter, and we'll leave you with this verse from 1 Peter which says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." Thanks for listening, and we will be back next week with a regular episode. Happy Easter!